The Association of Nigerian Authors (ANA) at its March 2026 edition of Mbari series, a flagship quarterly gathering of intellectuals, writers and thought leaders, honored Professor Biodun Jeyifo, an intellectual giant and activist who died at the age of 80. Biodun, an emeritus professor and one of the country's foremost scholars of literature and culture. He is the first president of the Academic Staff Union of Universities, ASU.
Essentially, he was a man who, through his writing, sees the writer as the conscience of the nation. And in a moment of moral crisis, such as the one that we are inside now, the writer should rise up and be counted. She should speak from conscience. He should have the courage to really engage the issues of the day in terms of government having to do right by the people. That essentially is what his life was about, and it is what this particular event we have just concluded is about, to honor him.
Government will only celebrate Soyinka because they want to buy into his world image. Soyinka is a figure that if government celebrates him, they have something to gain from that. So Jeyifo and co should be celebrated by the government. Though he has been very critical, he has been a Marxist theorist, positive theorist that talks about the problem in society. So government will not ordinarily celebrate those kind of people because they are very critical. And that is also part of why even we as ANA, as writers, we've not gotten enough support from government. You know why? Because they see us as critical people. They can give journalists, bosses, money. Can't you see donated by the Union of Journalists, by this state, that state? They do that, but have you ever seen any boss or anything that say of ours donated by government? They will not. Because they still see us as critical discipline. If we give them anything, they will still criticize us.
The association celebrates the legacy of the late Professor Biodun Jeyifo, a distinguished scholar, critic, and literary icon whose contributions to African literature and cultural studies remain significant.
It is understood that, with the exception of Edward Said, Obi Baba, and Spivak, Johnny Jeyifo is of that level of intellectual exaltation. That means he's not just a theorist, he's not just a cultural worker, he's a philosopher. He was a philosopher. A philosophical thought that is coherent, coordinate, and persuasive across many thresholds. And what he did globally for literature is almost unparalleled. In Europe, setting up departments of African studies and literature in China at Peking University, driving other scholars to that place and then ensuring the permanent location of African literary and cultural studies there in China. And then back home in Nigeria, of course, we talked about literary activism and his passion and commitment to progressive ideas and thought. One is tempted to go on and on. All I do know is that we meet the physical presence of the man, but eternally, his soul will live in our hearts. And the memories of what he was and the gifts he left behind will not only nourish this generation, will empower the souls of the generation not yet.
So, Biodun Jeyifo. That taught me. I never came in contact with him. So I've met many people who have come in contact. But the first time I heard his name was in 2001. Because I was not a literary student, I was not a literature student. The ones that I was familiar with were people like Okibo, Soyinka, and even people like Osofisho. But I was never involved with them. So when I joined ANA Nigeria in 1998, I wrote a very beautiful work. Everybody appreciated it. And by the time I finished, they were clapping tremendously. So they now started examining the work. By the time they finished, they would say, "Man, I don't get to." By the time they tore the work into pieces, I knew I had to learn how to write properly in Nigeria. So after that, I fell in love with poetry. Started reading West African verses, Dennis Walker, Joe Vincent's book, all of them. Everything by Okibo and Co. I now published my first work. Instead of those, I published poetry, and I sent it to Professor Nala. And when I sent to Professor Nala through somebody, he was in Lagos University. He now mentioned that I seem to be under the influence of people like Biodun Relay, Biodun Jeyifo. So I was wondering, who are these people? That's when I started interrogating their work. And I realized that these are distinguished scholars that have bestrode our landscape, literary landscape. And now, with the demise of Biodun Jeyifo, we felt it obligatory that we should celebrate him within the Writers' Caucus.
The Mbari series continues to serve an important platform for intellectual exchange and literary engagement. The 2026 edition was dedicated to honor the memory of Professor Biodun Jeyifo, whose work shaped African intellectual discourse. In Abuja, Chimeze Zadima.